Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be discussing this book, Trail of Lightning. What caught my eye on the shelf was this really reflective, you can really see it when it catches the light. It's a bright yellow and red, but also, like, the reflectiveness also just catches your eye very well. This is copyright 2018. The cover design is by Nicholas Sciaccia. The illustration is copyright 2018 by Tommy Arnold. I try to do books about or by women during March because it's Women's History Month. And this one is by the author Rebecca Rowanhorse. This is part of the Sixth World series. To my understanding, she's only written two in this setting, but it's an interesting story about the Diné, which is otherwise known as the Navajo Reservation. It's written by a Native American woman from New Mexico. I don't think she's Diné, but I think she's one of the other Puebloans, but is writing about a group of people she has been around for a lot of her life. Now, one of the things I was kind of iffy about is the way the Sixth World is described, because in ancestral Puebloan and Apache, and I think they're properly called Nde, and the Navajo, the Diné, the two are related. The way the worlds work is that, and this is a symbol you'll see a lot in petroglyphs throughout the Four Corners region, but the spiral is meant to represent a religious symbol in the same way the cross is for Christianity. And the spiral is used to indicate the number of worlds that have passed with each time humanity rising out of a cave or out of the ground, which is why their religious structures, the kivas, are set into the ground, and why chimneys are prominent in it, and why a hole in the center of the kiva is prominent, because it is meant to symbolize the progression of the worlds. So in the Sixth World, some environmental calamity has happened where Earth has kind of retaliated against humanity, and it's partially brought on by wars by humans and partially by a kind of innate magic to Earth. And instead of just the seawaters rising by 200 feet or 300 feet, as is the range expected by climate change, this is by like 2,000 feet from my understanding. It is a huge change that effectively sinks a lot of humanity and leaves what remains in a weird limbo where it's past the stone, it's past the internet age, but electricity doesn't really exist, nor does large industry, because a lot of industry was happening in the places that were flooded. So it's people picking up the scraps and surviving in other ways. And in the Sixth World, the Diné, the actual land of the Diné, is risen and surrounded by a giant wall that is erected by one of the spirits. Now, the part of me that kind of didn't like that aspect of the setting is that it implies that because we don't really hear about anything from the other Pueblos, that the Diné had the spirits on their side, but nothing else really seems to. The small snippets you get are that Albuquerque is kind of run by a military junta, and Denver is way in the north, is ruined, and you don't really hear about the Pueblos, but like the Acoma have their mesa, as do the Zuni. as do, and this is one thing I didn't quite get, the Hopi also have their own mesas, but are within what was Diné. And so the entirety of the homeland of the Diné is surrounded. The Hopi are actually surrounded by the Navajo as well, the Diné. So it's a weird interaction. She doesn't really explain much about the western part of the Diné. It really focuses on Gallup and that being a town right by the reservation but not within the reservation. So it's Gallup. There are some human trade that goes on between Gallup, Grants, Albuquerque, but for the most part, it's set on Diné. And the main character is named Maggie Hosky, and she is a monster hunter, and she goes after witches, and they don't really use that word. If they talk about it, the ones I know, they'll talk about it in English like witches, but they won't use the actual words. My understanding is akin to how the Old English believed that by saying the actual name of a bear, you summoned it into your presence. By actually talking about witches directly, or by using the actual word for the evil witches and all, it kind of summons their attention, and you're likely to be cursed or targeted by their machinations. So in this setting, there are monsters, there are great spirits. Coyote is one of them. You interact with a couple other prominent spirits as well in this story. But Maggie is someone who kind of has her clan activated in a way. Basically, the way the Puebloans and the Diné and the Apache work is that they're matrilineal, but they are of a clan and belong to clans, and clans are passed down through the mother. So when a Diné introduces themselves, they introduce themselves first by their mother's clan, which is their clan, and then their father's clan, which is not their clan, and then their mother's father's clan and their father's father's clan. And so they list 4 different clans. And in this case, because of the magic of the new world, the 6th world, those who have kind of activated their clan gain some benefit related to it. And so Deer Clan, Bear Clan, eventually in the story you see a lot of people that with certain tools you can actually see how their clan affects them. And Deer Clan have antlers, or like I think it's Ram Clan has like the ram's horns or stuff like that. Corn Clan has its affects, and she has 2 clans that, because of the way they interact, make her great for hunting people and monsters. And so she does work in that line. So she is a monster hunter. She is trained by the greatest monster hunter in their myth, which is a spirit. And so there's a lot of interesting interaction between the spirits and the religion of the Diné, and also the modern-ish world. So she uses a sawed-off shotgun partially and a machete otherwise. The sawed-off shotgun she uses only rarely because gunpowder is limited in this setting, because there's no real industry to produce the gunpowder. And so she does have a standard shot, but she also has one that affects witches. Shells have corn pollen mixed in with them, which is dangerous to spirits and to witches and can cause them lasting harm. And so she uses those rounds only when necessary, but even then, she only uses shotgun rounds only when necessary as well. She primarily uses a large knife or a machete. So it's an interesting situation. She is kind of super soldier-like with the way that her clans empower her. And there are other people that she meets who have powers because of their clan. And so it's a very cool book focusing on the Diné, the Navajo reservation, and the different spirits related to them, the different aspects of their culture and religion that wouldn't otherwise be faithfully represented. It also feels kind of strange because it sets up that it is part of a series, but the book itself doesn't really lend itself towards leading into a second book. So it's mostly a standalone story, but is mixed in with the potential for more. It doesn't seed that well though, and I don't know, it's just kind of interesting the interaction between the off Diné and on Diné lands. It's a really cool story. I enjoyed reading it. It lives up to the outward appearance as well. It really does pop in a really fun way. But I know there, like I said, there were some misgivings I had with it because it kind of implies that one culture is above the others or more right than the others, or it doesn't really expand into those pueblos, the other tribes in the area, in a satisfying way. The bar they interact with the most in this is clearly a well-known bar off Diné because there are people from outside at that bar and people from Diné as well. But like I said, you just don't see the other tribes, and that's something I would have liked to see, especially because it implies that a large part of why civilization collapsed was because everything under a certain elevation was sunken. But like most of the Four Corners region, most of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico is above like 3 or 4 thousand foot elevation. All of the pueblos that I know of are above that elevation. So every single one of the 23 reservations and pueblos in New Mexico should have been able to survive. But it doesn't really discuss anything except for Diné. And there's one thing to be said for that. New Mexico and Arizona and Colorado and Utah are huge states. And New Mexico alone, just to get from Gallup to Albuquerque is over 100 miles. Gallup to Santa Fe is 150 miles, I think. So we're looking at larger distances. Once you get onto the plains, Carlsbad from Gallup is well over 200 miles, maybe even 300. So you're looking at huge distances that, the Mescalero Apache might still be thriving on Sierra Blanca and in the Sacramento Mountains, which are at a range of like 7,000 foot elevation to 12,000 foot elevation. So if any flood happens, those Apache should still be out there. But it's just a weird interaction where it only focuses on Diné, and because of that, I just really wish there were stories about other aspects. Like if the Sixth World, instead of focusing on Maggie in a book 3, it focuses on someone in the Mescalero Apache or the Taos Pueblo or something like that, and how do those tribes interact with their surroundings. The Taos Pueblo has been actively used for, I think, 12 to 1300 years, the actual Pueblo itself, but it is very close to and has very little geographical separation from the town of Taos, which is itself a small town, only about 10,000 people, and it's a very spread out and not a very densely populated region. But the Taos Pueblo has its sacred mountain and its older Pueblo itself right there, and so it would be interesting to know what happened to them. And so the setting leaves me wanting to know more about the setting, but the story doesn't leave me wanting to see too many more stories about the main character. So Trail of Lightning was slightly disappointing, but overall a good read. I am excited to read book 2. I bought it recently, but haven't gotten around to reading it. I just have so many books in my queue. But Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Rowanhorse is going right back on that shelf behind me where it was sitting for months before this video. So, yeah. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.